All right, the recording is starting. I'm going to
Started.
do a quick kind of intro here first, just to give you all a little overview of how tonight's going to go, and then we have a slide deck that we are going to share with you as we go through tonight's presentation. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Eric Dobler. I'm the founder of Dobler College Consulting and one of four of the independent advisors who work here at the firm. Joining me tonight is the rest of the gang, Lara Poulios, who also is here in Connecticut with me, Peter Bartoli, and then of course, you know Madonna, you know Prince, and we have Mel. So the four of us tonight are going to kind of walk you through uh, some kind of present topics in the world of college admissions and things we spend all day, every day, working through and trying to figure out with our families so that they can make informed decisions. And I know a number of you here tonight are current families who are working with one of us, and I want to just say, first of all, thank you for the trust and the confidence that you place in us to partner with you and your child or children as we have gone through this process. And then for those of you who are new, we hope you can walk away with some really good insights and some ideas tonight, things that maybe you can put into practice yourself as your kids are going through. But we also invite more conversation. And if you wanted to chat further about how one of us might be able to work with you and your kids as they are going through the process, that is definitely a conversation that we are happy to have. All right, so I am going to get the screen share started here. And we're going to do that. And we're going to click the slideshow. Okay, it looks like I did it right. That's a good start. And we're going to go. Nope, I didn't. The slideshow went backwards. So we are definitely we are not technologically savvy. Let's just get out of the way. We can do everything we want with colleges, but technology still eludes me some days. So let's kind of just get started with what we're going to focus on here tonight. As we had posted online and the different conversations we've had, we're going to talk about five topics tonight, which you can see here. The first of all, what's happening with large public universities over the last couple of years and the trends that are happening in their applicant pools. We're going to be talking a little about some hot majors, fields that are definitely becoming more competitive and a lot harder for students to get into and why. We're definitely going to spend some time talking about testing. Everybody always wants to know about testing and what's sort of happening in that landscape, how it's affecting admission, how it's affecting scholarships, and just how it's affecting the overall landscape. We're going to talk about essays and AI. Everybody loves talking about AI. It is a really hot topic in our field as we work with our students on doing things authentically and doing things the right way. So we're going to talk a little about that as well. And then, of course, value, cost, paying for college. How does that all get to come together, especially as costs keep increasing year over year, and the gap of like what the cost is and what's affordable just continues to get bigger. All right, so we're going to kind of go through each of these things tonight. If you have any questions along the way, you can absolutely post those questions in the chat. We're going to kind of keep an eye on those questions, but we are also going to leave time at the end. So if you want to wait, go through all the information here first, then we're going to stick around for a good 15, 20 minutes. We can chat, answer any questions, and then talk more about any of these topics at hand. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Mel and let her get us started here.
All right. So can y'all hear me okay? Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So yeah, well, we're gonna start off with well, can we
Oh,
go back
whoops.
to my beautiful
Sorry.
visual aid? One more, yeah, perfect. Okay, my beautiful and slightly scary visualization here. So public universities have gotten extremely popular. They were always popular, but especially the large flagship institutions for states are just exploding right now. I mean, especially in the Southeast. Like everyone is seeing that in our field. I don't want this chart to be misleading though. Like you can see where there's major growth, but that does not mean that it's harder to get into, let's say, University of South Carolina as it is to get into Clemson. Like it's still harder to get into Clemson than South Carolina. But all of these Southeastern colleges are getting way more popular. And I would suspect that they are just going to increase doing that this year. One of the big changes that we're seeing is that the Southern schools in general are shedding their essays. So some of them have never required essays. Like some of these don't require any essays to apply. Like a Clemson has just like an optional essay. But even UNC, which is generally the most competitive of the Southern state flagships, along with UVA and UT Austin. They got rid of their essay this year. UNC, not UT. And Georgia, who is like infamous for having an annoying essay, got rid of their essay, which like genuinely shocked me. And some of my students are like, yay, like that makes it easier to apply. Yes, it does make it easier to apply, which means way more people are going to apply to these universities. So we're just seeing them trend. Now, the nice thing is that if your student is like dead set on going to a Southern university, they can very likely do that. The What we're just seeing though is like an incremental like trend towards more competitive. So 5 years ago, like UGA was in a certain level that now I'm seeing University of Tennessee at Knoxville approaching. University of Tennessee at Knoxville 5 years ago is where I'm seeing like Alabama approaching. So we're just seeing all of them kind of sliding towards being more competitive. We're not entirely sure what's causing this. Like my own guess is because during COVID lockdowns, a lot of students were just on TikTok in like a dark room. And the colleges that did not shut down were these Southern schools. And they had this kind of like they were doing a big show of being open and fun and popular. And I do think that a lot of students now are like desperate for a fun community. And these colleges can often at least showcase that they provide that through Greek life and warm weather and big parties and beautiful big campuses. And I'm not hating on schools in the South. I went to one. But like we've just seen them get so popular because it used to be just like a lot of kids from the South and Southeast would gravitate towards these colleges, but now it's everyone. Kids, I mean, some of you may be these people, like people in New England, people on the West Coast. They also want to go to the Southeast. And so it's gotten a bit more competitive. Just be aware though that, like University of Georgia is not the same as applying to like South Central Louisiana State, right? Like anything that's not a flagship institution is generally still just open access. Like you can go if you so choose to Direction School of State or like other non-flagship campuses, but we are trying to make sure that families are aware that these are getting more difficult. And another trend that we'll be talking about with Peter later is a lot of Southern schools specifically are moving back to requiring test scores if they were ever test optional. Because Georgia and Florida were never test optional. Auburn was only test optional and name only. And now we're seeing them shift that way.
Mhm.
All right. We can, next slide.
All right, because nothing in college admissions is simple, I'm here to tell you that the major you choose can actually make things more competitive and more complicated than just applying to a university and assuming that the acceptance rate for that university applies to everyone equally. For the most part, it doesn't. There are some schools that admit to the university as a whole. Northeastern University in Boston is an example of this. You apply to Northeastern University, you don't have to apply as any specific major, nor do they really factor that into the admissions process. They just admit you to the university. But the majority of colleges are actually looking at the major you are applying for. They're looking at your application to see if there is evidence that you are qualified to be in that major. And and they may have a restricted number of spots or have a higher number of applicants for those particular majors, making the acceptance rate for that particular program dramatically lower than the overall acceptance rate for the university. And so the four we have on the slide here: nursing, extremely competitive, I think by far the most competitive. Comp sci is a competitive major. Business and engineering are just extremely popular. So, just by sheer volume of applications, those tend to be more competitive majors too. And of course, there's others. I'm thinking of, anything related to the performing arts is going to be competitive as well, and very talent based. And I actually went and found Rutgers University in New Jersey happens to publish their rates by college, their acceptance rates by college. So just to give you an example, Rutgers for the class of 2025 had almost 7,300 applications for 275 nursing spots. I mean, that's just staggering. They had over 17,000 applications for a little less than 1,200 engineering spots. So you can see, just extremely competitive. And just to further complicate things a little bit, sometimes, and let's use nursing as an example, sometimes you have direct admit programs, meaning that you are applying to be directly admitted into the nursing program. Sometimes it's not direct admit. So you're applying into the university, and then once you get there, you have to apply into the nursing program, which can be just, if not more, honestly, competitive. So it's really important as you're developing a college list to understand the numbers you're up against for the major that you're looking at, and then also to understand the admit policy. Is it direct admit? Do you get to the university and then roll the dice that you'll be admitted after? I think it's also important to mention here that your application will really benefit by showing the work that you've done to research this field, get involved with this field, and start to kind of prepare yourself for it. So I'll use again nursing as a great example. For my students that are interested in going into nursing, I'm telling them, go volunteer in a medical facility during the summer. Put in some hours at your local hospital. Maybe you are transporting patients around or bringing them blankets or magazines or whatever it is, but immersing yourself in a healthcare facility where you can really start to absorb what that means to work in that setting on a daily basis. And you can show that activity on your application, so that they see that you've done your homework in terms of preparing yourself to study for this field. That can be a really important factor when they are evaluating your application. They want to know that context for how you've prepared yourself. So like, what does this mean for you? First, it's really important that you don't just assume that because you're a strong student and a university has a particular acceptance rate that you're going to get in. You really need to consider the major that you are applying for and what the numbers look like at that school. Second, you need to research the admit process for that program. You don't want to be in a situation where you go to college thinking you're a business major and then you find out you're kind of a general undeclared and that you have to apply for business once you get there, because that isn't a slam dunk. That's not a guarantee. And then third, like, you really want to build a balanced college list, especially with these more competitive majors. You can't have a ton of reach schools. You need to create more likelies and target schools, because these are just, you're competing for an incredibly low number of spots or against an incredibly high number of applicants. And so you need to be a little more conservative with how you are developing your list. But I also recommend too that if you are, for instance, applying to, let's say you're applying to a competitive 3+3 Doctor of Physical Therapy program. Well, these are, very limited spots. Consider using a second choice major. Most applications will allow you to indicate a first choice and then a second choice. And it essentially, they'll do 2 rounds of review for your application. They'll look at you for that first choice major. If you're not qualified for that, they'll go back and look at you for that second choice major. Just ups your odds a little bit and gives you another pathway into the field that you're interested in. All right.
One thing I would piggyback on that is, Lara, when you were talking about the value of going out and like volunteering, at a medical facility if you want to be a nursing student, or I've had some kids go and get their EMT license and do
Mm,
different things like that.
yeah.
But some schools, and I have this on my mind because as we're heading into the start of senior year and we're working on supplemental essays with a lot of our kids, there are some schools who may not ask for a supplemental essay, except for if you are
Mm,
applying to certain majors. And it comes up with nursing quite a bit.
yeah.
And what's ironic is that they want to know, why are you really interested in this field? And sometimes they want to know, what have you already done to
Yes.
learn about the nursing field, right? So if you haven't explored any of that already, you get kids who look at you and they're like blank stare, like what do I say? What do I do? What do I have to offer? And
Yeah.
and that's a tough spot to be in at that point.
Right. Yeah, you make a great point. University of Dayton, actually, that is the exact case with their nursing program. And I just went through this with a student. They ask specifically, why are you interested in the nursing program and what steps have you taken to prepare yourself for this?
Yep.
So clear as day, they want to see evidence.
Yep.
Yeah, great point.
All right, we're now going to shift the conversation a little bit to testing.
Okay, so easily one of the most confounding topics for parents that and students that I work with, because there's a lot of it depends that goes on in the admissions process, and I think testing is a perfect example of that. So, schools will say that they're test optional, right? And everybody thinks, great, I don't need to submit a test. And off I go and I can just apply. Well, I think it's important that before making the decision about whether to submit testing or not, to find a little bit, dig beneath the surface a bit and find out what's actually happening behind the scenes. So, for example, we can take some schools that are kind of test optional in name only. So, a school like Texas A&M or Boston College, where technically they're test optional, but their admit rates, their the submitted score rates are very high, above 75% for each of those. So it's important that data is available, and working with an advisor, they can certainly help you find that data as well, to find out, should we submit. I think it's also critical that if you are submitting, we have a score that is competitive within their accepted range. And by competitive, usually we want that to be in the 75th percentile. So those are some things to consider there. And then there are schools that are genuinely test optional. I have found that those schools were typically schools that were committed to test optional policies before it became a thing. And when did it become a thing? It became a thing during the pandemic, right? And so let's take a Bates, for example. You can go to Bates and you'll get directly from them saying, we really don't want to see your test score. It tells us nothing. It tells us your demographic, and that's about it. And we already have that information. So, same thing with American. We can also say the same for Bowdoin and other schools that we have listed here. So looking up the history of the test policy, I think tells you a bit more information about how committed they are to this kind of quote unquote holistic approach that reaches beyond just testing. Do they really take the time to understand who the student is in that data? The other thing, of course, and just to, cap on what Mel was saying earlier, testing is making a comeback as well. And in the Southeast, we see Georgia, we see Tennessee, we see U Miami adopting test required policies. And that is, part of it a reaction to the amount of applications coming in, but also removing their supplementals just gives them another data point to use in place of that. So I think the takeaway here is to make sure that you're up to date with school policies. How are they changing? And they change year by year. So it's really important to be on top of that. If you have a son or daughter applying now and you have one that's maybe 2 years younger, just erase everything you knew about those policies and research them again because they are constantly evolving. And then, next slide, Eric. So the other thing to think about here, and this caps on a bit of like what Laura was just saying, where we have special programs, and they'll often set their own bar, separate from the college or the university itself. And so let's take nursing, and direct entry medical, programs that may require a specific score to be accepted into that college. So, for example, Elon is a test optional school, but they have direct admit for nursing and they have requirements that you need to reach for that. Same thing with West Virginia. Pitt has guaranteed admission and they'll hold you to very high scores, higher than what they would for regular admission into that program. So, it's important to do your research, based on the program we're looking to enter when we go to the school, as the policy definitely can vary within the university. And I bottom line takeaway is always that, we have to read the fine print here, and make sure that we're well informed on how to proceed to get into the program, and even, backing it up, if it is a school that is test optional, but taking in a significant amount of students who are applying, one thing to keep in mind is that an omission, a lack of a score can look like an omission, to a school like a BC that's saying we're taking 75% of accepted students, have submitted scores. So we have to think about that as we go forward, and begin to view those schools in a different light. But this is something that I think is one thing just to speak on as well, and some of this is coming with my experience doing test prep for years, is that I'm coming across a lot of students who tend to have kind of wishful thinking at times about, hey, I have an 1150 right now. Sure, I can get to like a 1450 or 1400. And, it's got to be a hard truth sometimes about I would not chase those numbers if they're not there. And there's a lot of people in the test prep world who will tell you you can get there, but it's very, very difficult to do something like that. So I think it's important also just have a good reality check on where are our numbers, what are the best viable options based on those numbers, and understand the policies and the nuances within the policies.
It never ends, does it, with testing?
No.
All right, so we're going to shift from testing to writing, right? Polar opposites here in terms of college applications. And the interesting thing is as AI has become more of a thing over the last couple of cycles, I think when it first kind of presented itself, a lot of us were like, all right, what's going to happen with this? What do we really need to understand? And we kind of assumed it would affect the essay process. I don't think any of us really expected it to affect the essay process as much as it has and as quickly as it has. Um, as you can see here on the right side of the screen, this is just in the last two cycles. And a majority of these schools are in this current cycle right now, where these schools have dropped their essay requirements. And when we talk about essay requirements, let's separate those into two pockets, right? Every school, for the most part, wants the main essay, or what you'll hear as called the personal statement. So that's the 650 word essay. It's very reflective. It's about yourself. It's insightful. Here's who I am as a person kind of essay. And that's one essay that goes to every school that you're applying to. So for the most part, that's in place. That really has not been affected as much. So when we're talking about schools dropping essays, what we're referring to here are what we call supplemental essays. And these are the shorter, more directly defined essays where the school has traditionally wanted you to tell them why you're interested in them, right? Tell them why you want to pursue your major or how you see yourself pursuing your major at their school. So very direct. Here's me plus you as the school, and here's how we kind of go together in my eyes. And these schools have been dropping these essays left and right. And it's been pretty shocking because this list of schools, they have had essays forever. And they have been very important parts of the process for these schools. And, what they're telling us, sometimes beating through the bush a little bit, not quite being entirely clear, but saying like, oh, hey, we're not getting like what we thought we were going to get out of those essays, or gosh, our applications are increasing so much, so it's just volume and we don't have time to get to it. But what we're hearing in other conversations is that these essays can be gamed so easily through AI, right? I mean, you can plug in a prompt like, hey, tell me the top three things I need to know about Miami's business program. And if I'm interested in being a entrepreneur, how do I tell Miami that I'm a great fit for their program? And then boom, in 3 seconds, you've got a 250 word essay that you can put together and throw into the application. So I think the schools are kind of, gently saying, we don't value it anymore because we can't validate that the writing is authentic, that the student is authentic. So, in some ways, this is a win for a lot of kids who are going to apply because it's less work. They can complete the application a whole lot easier, and it takes some of the stress and pressure off, especially if you haven't been able to visit a school, or you just haven't really been able to develop that real informed opinion, or maybe the school kind of showed up on your radar kind of late. These things happen, and when a school wants you to talk about how you fit together, that can be hard to do. But what it also means is when there's less work to do, applications increase. And we see this year over year. So Virginia dropped their essay requirements. I think it was it beginning of last cycle, I believe they dropped it, and they saw like a 20% increase in applications. Right? That is not a school who needs a 20% increase in applications. And we also see this with the bigger schools like a Northeastern, who has never required an essay, but their applicant pool keeps increasing. Why? It's an easy application to complete. But as applications increase, the size of the incoming class is staying level. So acceptance rates plummet, and then here comes the popularity chase. Oh, that school just got more selective. They must be the best. That's where I have to go, right? And we see that cycle happening every year, and it's like, no, they just gamed the process a little bit here to get you to buy in and to pay the $90 application fee to be denied. And there are thousands and thousands of kids who do this every cycle. So parents, if you really don't want to throw away $90 per application fee, hear what I'm dropping on you tonight. Okay? Save some money along the way. But this is the thing, and this is only going to continue, right? Because I mean, let's be honest, AI is getting into everything that we do. It is not going away. And I think as this cycle happens, we're going to see more colleges follow suit. Because what is one thing colleges do? They love to copycat, right? If something is working at one school and they see an application increase, or their rankings increase, or anything that is like publicity based, ooh, we got to get on the coattails and we got to do it too. And you're going to see that happening cycle after cycle. The other thing it's going to do is it's going to put incredible amount of pressure on the more quantitative aspects of an applicant's file, grades, the rigor of your coursework, how they're reviewing a transcript, test scores. And I think this may overlap with more schools having to make that decision of, well, if we're going to get rid of the qualitative, we got to get deeper into the quantitative. And we may now see more emphasis on testing as we go, because they are going to need metrics to filter through the class. Because when you start getting rid of essays like this, and if they don't offer interviews, and if they're not going to be reading a whole lot through a main essay, how are they making their decisions? Right? Everything comes down to cutoffs at a certain point. So there's going to be a lot of unpredictable things happening here over the next couple of cycles. I think it's also putting that emphasis on the main essay, and we're definitely seeing that as a still a really heavy process, for a lot of kids. But this has been a big one, and it's definitely going to continue to hang around for the next couple of cycles, and probably more. Talk
Okay,
money.
so yeah, money, speaking of money and making, yeah, I call those 85 to $90 like you never know, I might as well apply just like donations. Cool. Um,
Yep.
but yeah, speaking of financial aid, so I want to talk a bit about need-based aid. We're going to talk about both need and merit aid today, but I find that a lot of families don't really understand either very well. So something that I highly recommend to all parents, and this is never a fun conversation, but it's something that I just genuinely recommend you do, is have a very real conversation with your kids about what your budget is. Even if it's sort of a wide ballpark, too many times I see families that say, well, we're just going to make it work. And when college costs upwards of like 85 to $100,000 a year, for like a lot of those out of state publics and like fancy private schools. A lot of people just like can't make that work. And as someone who graduated high school in the Great Recession, like I still see a lot of people my age still paying off their loans. So I would just suggest like there is always a way to make a reasonable and like exciting college list for your student that is going to have more like financial sense to it and like prudence to it. But I need to get into some letters first. So FAFSA. So that's the free application for federal student aid. Um, I highly recommend that every family, regardless of your background, as long as your student is a citizen of the United States or able to submit it, submit it. In some states like Texas, where I'm from, it is required to submit the FAFSA in order to graduate from public school. I actually think that's a great idea. The FAFSA is created to be as easy to fill out and file as possible. They have a tax retrieval tool. It is quite easy to do. It will open in October for the following fall. Um, you do not need to wait until fall to fill this thing out, at least not a practice run. So all the FAFSA does is spit out a number, which is your student's SAI. So the SAI is the Student Aid Index. And if you have some older kids or you went through this fairly recently, it used to be called the EFC, which is the Expected Family Contribution. Functionally the same, but now it's the SAI and it can actually be negative, which is a big difference. I think a lot of families have no clue what their SAI is going to be. Like I'll talk to families and they'll say like, oh, we're just not going to qualify for anything. And that may be true for some stuff, but I find a lot of families now that college does not cost on average like 10 to 30K a year, and it costs closer to 2 home down payments per year. Like you may actually qualify for need at some of these institutions. I have seen it. I have had families where they have qualified for aid at certain schools and not others. So that I recommend you file the FAFSA so you can actually see if you qualify for aid. If you're applying to private universities, there's a high chance you will also need to file the CSS profile. It is not a replacement for the FAFSA, it's supplementary. And that's what we call the nosy auntie of financial aid applications. They will get all up in your business. Everyone hates the CSS profile, but the way I explain it is that these colleges have monopoly money that they can throw around, right? Like I like to joke about SMU because I'm from Dallas and they have a tanning pool at their school. In order to have your tanning pool, you have to have a lot of money and they meet full need. But in order for them to meet need, they want to know all your business. So whereas the FAFSA is very broad, lowest common denominator questions, the CSS is going to ask about your child custody and home equity and all sorts of invasive stuff. I joke that soon they're going to ask about blood type. But it's worth doing it. It is like you just get your tax forms together and it is worth doing it. So I highly recommend that you do an SAI calculator like now. If you're a senior family, do it now, get it out of the way so you at least have an idea of what's coming. If you have junior, sophomore, it's not a bad idea to get ahead of this and see what your SAI might be in the future. And then just knowing whether or not you have need is such a simple math equation that even I can do it because I am terrible at math. It's like envelope math, okay? You have the cost of attendance of a school, which is not just the tuition, because I have seen families get totally blindsided because they look at the tuition, but the full cost, especially in major cities, is going to be like double that oftentimes. Even not in major cities, like Indiana University is like way more than just their tuition. So look at the full cost of attendance, which every college has to publish on their website. They have to estimate what it costs to exist as a student on that campus for either a full semester or a calendar year based on credits. It's going to depend on the school. You take the cost of attendance and you subtract your SAI, and whatever number that spits out is your need. So if we have a family who has a $60,000 a year SAI, this is, like a comfortable middle class family with maybe like a fairly high income, they may not qualify for need at UConn because if it's like, 40 minus 60, that's a negative 20K, you don't qualify for need. But if you're looking at like Miami, where it's like 100,000 a year, well, now you're looking at 60,000 in need per year that college can try to meet. So I have seen families where they didn't qualify for aid, especially at public institutions, but that they did qualify for aid elsewhere. And then a couple more things before I let Laura take over and talk about merit. I am someone who is, if any of you know me, a little bit anxious energy and not a gambler and very much about playing it safe. Okay. I highly recommend that even if you don't think you're going to qualify for anything other than, because everybody qualifies for the federal direct unsubsidized loan, that's the $5,500 the first year. And then that increases over the next 2 years. Everyone qualifies for that if your student is a citizen or qualified for it as like a green card holder. If you choose not to submit it, there are some colleges that can penalize you for that in certain ways. So it's rare, but it does happen. Some colleges will not consider you for merit scholarship if you do not file for financial aid need-based. Not very common, but it does happen. And then the big one that I say as someone who's a little like a nervous energy person is God forbid something happens and your kid is at college, like they're a freshman or a sophomore and you lose your job, your house burns down, or God forbid a parent passes away. There are more colleges, like there are many colleges that will not let you file for institutional aid. They cannot stop you from filing the FAFSA. But FAFSA is peanuts when we're talking about, $80,000, $90,000 a year. There are a lot of universities that'll say, we will not consider your change in circumstances because we didn't know your circumstances to begin with. So I highly recommend, even if you are going to have a massive SAI and you're not going to get anything, like in an abundance of caution, I highly recommend every family file every annoying piece of paperwork just to do with financial aid that they'll let you. It's not hard, it's just annoying is kind of the way to look at it. So and one final thing, sorry, one more thing. Net price calculators, another thing that colleges are legally required to have on their website. Not all net price calculators are created equal. Some of them are kind of awful, and they're not gospel, right? Like I don't recommend showing up to a college and saying, well, the net price calculator said this, and the college will just say, well, you said your kids' grades are higher than they were. But which is pretty common. I recommend filling out a net price calculator for every single college on your students list. And if you find that none of those are in your budget, you need to rethink your list because your list is whack. Okay, on to merit scholarships. I've said my rant.
Actually, so Mel, we do have a question. This is for you. So our question is, so you are suggesting to understand what the SAI number is now or to fill in the FAFSA because it opens up in October?
I mean, it depends. Do you like horror movies? Like, do you like jump scares? Do you like being like terrified or do you like to prepare? I mean, that's the thing is like, you can wait. I mean, you cannot file the FAFSA yet. You cannot do it, but you can go on like finaid.gov, like the Department of Education hasn't been fully decimated yet. They do still have a functional website that has an SAI calculator on there where you can at least get your federal methodology. That's the FAFSA's SAI. Institutional methodology is far more opaque. A lot of colleges play that close to their chest on purpose, so that they can make personal judgments and throw their money around how they choose. but like you can at least get an idea and not get like a jump scare in October when you've already applied to a bunch of places and it feels too late for others. Like I recommend getting ahead of it. It is updated right now for the current senior class for the SAI calculator for the years because it's always prior year. So tax returns from 2 years prior to when your kid is entering. So yes, do it.
All right. So let's talk about merit scholarships. So merit scholarships can be a really effective way to reduce the exorbitant cost of college, but you really have to understand how they work. Unlike need-based financial aid, merit scholarships are based on the profile of the student. So usually that's going to be their academic profile, but it could also be athletics, performing arts, any other type of talent that the college is interested in attracting. They use merit scholarships to attract the most talented students. And there's somewhat of an inverse relationship between selectivity and the number of merit scholarships or the amount of merit scholarships that are awarded. Some colleges do not award merit scholarships at all. The Ivy Leagues, as an example, do not do merit scholarships. And that's really important to understand because I've had families say to me, well, we're going to have our son apply to Harvard University. We don't qualify for any need-based financial aid, but, we're just going to hope that he gets some scholarship money. You're not. Just full stop. If you do not qualify for need-based financial aid, you are full pay at a school that doesn't do merit scholarships. That is going to be a $90,000 bill for you. So what you want to do if you're really targeting merit scholarships to reduce the cost of college is you need to be looking at those schools where your child's academic profile is above the median. If you have a student that or a child that has a 3.8 weighted GPA and an 1100 SAT, and they are applying to a school where the median GPA is a 4.1 weighted with a 1300 SAT, well, they're falling below the average there. There is no reason to think that they are going to be awarded an exorbitant amount of merit scholarship, right? The colleges are using that money to attract the most talented students. What you want to do is build a college list that is at least somewhat comprised of colleges where your student is going to kind of rise above the pack. In that situation, they're going to be awarding merit scholarship to bring them in. And you don't just kind of want to roll the dice on this. This is along the lines of what Mel was talking about with, figuring out what your SAI is well in advance and understanding your budget. You also want to be researching those colleges where merit scholarship is going to bring the cost of that college down within your budget range. Don't just apply to all the reach schools you can, roll the dice and hope that someone comes back with a good offer. There are plenty of tools out there. We certainly do a lot of work with our families, advising them and giving them data on where they're going to be maximizing their scholarship opportunity. But keep a really balanced list, obviously academically, but also financially as well.
Yeah, and one thing just to add on to the end of all of that is for those of you here tonight who are existing families, as we start to work into September, you will be hearing from us pretty regularly about the financial aid applications opening up, any nuances involved with the launch this year. If we're hearing about any challenges, we're going to be stressing timelines, getting the financial aid applications filed early, and this way they're out of the way. And the whole idea is to kind of like smooth the process, at least on that end, as much as we can. So that information will be forthcoming as we get a little bit closer.
And actually, we've got a great question about this. And someone asked, is it worth negotiating merit to see if you can get more money? Honestly, in my experience, that whole negotiating merit thing is like an overblown myth that has made its way around the internet. And it's also, I think there are some people out there who try to sell their services and say that they can negotiate your merit and get you a better price for college. There are some colleges that will take into account If you've had change financial circumstances or something that you weren't able to share with them from the get-go about your budget, that will, have you fill out a form and may review that form and consider your request for additional merit money. But this is not like buying a car. You're not going to be haggling with them to try to get the cost down. Do not count on negotiating merit as a viable strategy for reducing college costs. And you may here and there find a school that will talk to you about it, but that is not something that you want to count on. And I think they shut it down. For the most part, colleges I have seen in the past few years shut it down very quickly when someone tries to go back and just ask for more merit with no valid reason for why it's not affordable for them.
Yeah. And to go back to your presentation before about the hot majors, if you're in any one of those hot majors, forget it. They've got more kids in those pools than they know what to do with. So if it's not going to work for you financially, they'll give it to somebody else or they'll go to the wait list. And so, yeah, there's a domino effect there for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Can I answer it too really quickly? Because I have a lot of students who appeal. It has sort of gotten out of hand. And I put some of the best reasons to appeal in the chat. And the CSS profile will let you put extra circumstances in there, which the FAFSA will not. The smaller the college, the more they'll listen. The less selective the college, the more they'll listen. If you try to appeal at like, UW or UT, Austin, they'll tell you to go. I mean, they're not going to say anything, but like functionally, they're going to tell you to go pound sand. Like they have plenty of people lined up to take your spot. But small liberal arts college in the middle of Pennsylvania, they might work with you. I find a lot of the private institutions are far more likely if they're schools that already offer a lot of merit scholarship. But you don't want to go in with nothing. And I highly recommend that it be the student who drives that ship because they don't like it when the parent comes in and it looks like you're here to play hardball. If the student comes from a point of view of I really want to go to your school, but my mom and dad want me to go to this other school, but if you match that price, I'm going to you, that can work. I've seen that work. But you need to be serious about it and like basically only do it at like one or two places is my recommendation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Mel, and I think a good rule for all parents to heed going through this process as much as possible. Let your kid drive the bus. Let them be the one to make the phone call. Let them be the one to put the email together. Help them out. It's it's become almost a regular part of our practice, helping kids learn how to craft an email because nobody else is teaching them how to do it. But talking to them about how you make a phone call to a university and you address an adult with the question that you have in hand, the more your kid does that, the further it goes, but it's also a great life skill. Let them grow up a little bit, through this process and become a little bit more independent and a little more self-assured. Because we all know life's going to throw them a lot more later on. And if they learn how to do some of these things now, it's gonna pay off in the big picture. So I don't need to read this slide to you all. We could have spent the whole time tonight on any one of these five topics that we're talking about. And then the financial one, we could talk about that for hours because there are just so many nuances to it and so many layers to it. But like, these are we've chosen these topics because these are kind of hot button issues that we are seeing on a regular basis right now, day in and day out, as we are working with our students and their families. What we're hearing about through our colleagues and our networks. And also because these are just the biggest mistakes that happen over and over and over again. And with a little bit of foresight, a little bit of consideration, maybe a little bit of research, maybe just talking to somebody with the right questions, they can all be avoided too, right? And that's kind of the biggest thing we wanted to try to get across tonight is if you have kind of the right information at hand, you can make more informed decisions. Your kids' process can go a lot smoother. The outcomes are going to be better. And when you get to the back end of all of this, right? When decisions have all been released and financial aid offers have been released and merit scholarships have been awarded, and you're trying to get down to that final decision, let's be honest, on some level, that final decision is going to hurt because it is going to cost a lot. And it is also your kid launching themselves into their world, right? And there's a whole emotional piece to that as well. But we want that outcome to hurt the as least as it can. And we want you all to be excited, and we want it to be palatable, and we want this to be like the next great chapter in your kids' lives. It is our mantra here at the practice. We help kids find their futures, right? But to find that future, you got to do a lot of all these little things along the way. And unfortunately, I mean, fortunately for us, it's why we have a practice. But unfortunately, this process gets more nuanced, more layered, more complicated year in and year out. I can't even begin to tell you how much time the four of us as a team spend breaking down this problem, breaking down that problem. Did you hear what was going on at this school? Did you hear what was going on at that school? And then you know what happens in the next cycle? Rinse and repeat, but you just change the players because now it's different schools, different nuances, different problems. So there's just so much into this process. We hope tonight has been helpful. Our approach here at the practice, we treat every student in a very individualized way. It is about where you are currently and how we get you to where you want to be. As a family, we try to make sure everybody is involved, everybody is informed. We're making good, uh, sensical decisions, kind of as we're going through. And we want to, again, we want a really great outcome for you here. So, again, for the folks here in the room who have been with us for some time, thank you. We appreciate the trust and the confidence that you have placed in us. And for those of you who are, of course, going into your senior year, buckle up. The work is coming. The ride is going to get really exciting over the next couple of months. A little scary, like any roller coaster. It's a little scary, but it's really exciting too. It's a really, really cool time to go through all of this. And then for those of you who are new, again, if you would like to talk more, we have a contact form on our website. You also all received the RSVPs through me individually, so you could always reach out to me. I can get you in touch with any one of the advisors here. At the very least, we're happy to talk, happy to answer any questions, especially if there's something that we can do to help you accomplish any of these goals that we are talking about here. So from here on out for tonight, I'm going to shut off the screen share in a minute. I'm also going to pause the recording. I want to kind of open up the floor. If anybody has questions they want to ask, I feel like it's a lot easier to do that when you know you're not being recorded. I don't want anybody to feel like anxious or insecure about asking the questions. And let me also say that there are no dumb questions in this process, right? We've seen it all. We've heard it all. So I'm gonna stop the recording right now. And